Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Poker the broadcast. This is Kristen, and here with me is Shawan from uh, Hyperbridge, and Shawan is a guest that I'm long waiting to interview, and because bridge is very important, and the whole industry is evolving, and there's a lot of development from the Hyperbridge, and also I really love the the message you are sending to the ecosystem. So I follow your Twitters very closely. So that's why I really want to deep dive into your personal journey and the journey in the Hyperbridge. So welcome to Pokeworld.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to be here and always great to talk to you, Kristen.
Yeah, and to set up the context for our conversation, first part I want to uh, learn more about your personal experience. So let's start from when you get started in the crypto industry. So do you still remember the moment you first got pulled into crypto?
Yeah, no, I do remember I had been introduced to crypto by my coworkers at the time. I was working for a small software company and we built, enterprise software for big corporations. It was very boring, I'm not gonna lie to you, but my coworkers were always talking about Bitcoin and, crypto in general and some of their like altcoins that were like flying off in terms of returns on investments. I personally, I thought this was all a scam. There's always all of this get rich quick schemes and everything. And I think after 2017, when Bitcoin touched $1,000, I decided to take some time and look into what Bitcoin was. And then I discovered this idea of the double spending problem and the decentralized ledgers. And then I discovered Ethereum, which was like programmable applications that can be decentralized as well. And the application for me that really clicked was this notion of on-chain governance, right? This was something that Gav actually was talking about. And, to be very, very honest with you, I live in Nigeria where, we don't necessarily have the best governance systems. And I really saw potential for a blockchain and, on-chain governance to be this thing that could potentially transform the lives of many people, allowing them to be, permissionlessly part of governance and to make their voices heard and to be able to kind of vote on how like the government should spend and what the government should spend on. Now whether or not that works in practice, of course, given the Polkadot treasury, is a completely different thing, but I thought that was going to be a very huge application of blockchains. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. The first company you entered into crypto was Parity.
Yes, it was.
Why it's a high entry point.
So I mean, the how I got into parity, honestly, I cannot tell you how it happened. I after my whole research into blockchain, I
Mm-hmm.
started doing blockchain projects on the side. Like I was just experimenting with different things, and I started contributing to open source libraries and open source projects. And at the time, I think I saw the job offer, or rather the, I guess, job posting for parity on the subreddits in the Rust subreddits on Reddit, and I said, "Oh look, these people are doing like blockchain. They're doing Rust." I didn't even know like it was actually Gav who started parity at the time. I checked out their GitHub. I thought it was really crazy, and I said, "This is actually where I want to work." I'm very drawn to like complexity. I'm very drawn to like the frontier of technology, and so I applied. And they checked out my open source contributions to crypto and all that other stuff, and they thought it was going to be a very good fit. I remember having my last call with Gav himself, which was like crazy.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we had a really great conversation about crypto, kind of how I'm thinking about crypto and its applications here in Nigeria. And he was very interested in kind of what the culture could be for crypto, working with Parity. And yeah, I joined Parity in September, I think, 2019, thereabouts, or 2018, I'm not sure, thereabouts. And for me, it was one of the best places to work. I got to learn a lot of stuff. I got to basically get right down to the fundamentals of blockchain technology and the sort of philosophy as well. So yeah, I think Parity was really a great place at the time. I'm very, very grateful for my experience there.
Okay. And uh, you entered the parity before you entered the parity, or you already contribute to the some open source library, right? So that's
Yeah.
all self-taught experience, knowledge.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had very surface level, experience. I was trying to basically work on blockchains themselves and not just at the application layer because from my understanding, and way back then as well, there was already this concern that blockchains weren't going to scale. And we could see that very clearly in the gas prices of Ethereum. We could see that very clearly in the fact that Bitcoin could only process, 5 transactions per second. And
Mhm,
so, if we want to scale blockchains to the world, I figured I need to contribute to this scaling effort, right?
mhm,
And I think it was actually 2019 that Parity stopped working on Ethereum and, fully transitioned to building Polkadot, which was
mhm,
supposed to be the thing that scales blockchains.
mhm.
And yeah, that was actually very, very exciting for me as well.
Yeah, and you've been through some pivotal teams, Parity First and Composable, and now Hyperbridge. So, what was the most defining transition for you as a builder?
The most defining transition, I would love to say parity, but unfortunately, I wouldn't say parity. I would say composable. My time at Composable, working at the application layer of blockchains for the first time, was really eye-opening into the fact that a lot of the infrastructure that we had built maybe wasn't yet ready for developers. And so having to come to terms with that and having to come to terms with ways in which we can make this developer experience better was definitely the most important transition for me. But I feel like blockchain infrastructure without applications is ultimately very useless, right? So that's kind of why we set out to build out our own thing, Hyperbridge, and try to give developers the necessary infrastructure to build applications that can scale to the entire world, right? Because if you now have a cross-chain application, you're no longer isolated to a single chain. You can access users from any chain.
Yeah, it's really a transitioning of mindset.
Yeah.
Uh, and talking about the philosopher behind you, because your Twitter handle is Web3 philosopher, and your Twitter message is always something regard. There's some philosophy behind, I think. So is that a title you give yourself, or something others started calling you?
I'm not even sure where it came from, honestly, but I remember around 2022, a lot of people on crypto Twitter were both basically philosophers, right? They were all talking and philosophizing about crypto. I actually don't like philosophers. And so I call myself a philosopher as a way to mock the so-called Web3 philosophers.
Oh.
I think that just being a philosopher is actually also very useless. I think that philosophy is the foundation for any kind of science or any kind of engineering. And if you're just doing philosophy, then it's a bit wasted, right? So I'm not really a philosopher. I'm actually a builder. But of course, I do have some philosophical foundations for the stuff that we're building. And so that's kind of how I came about that name. And for me, I'm just trying to push the message that, look, you can talk, but you also have to do things. You also have to build things. You also have to ship and try to change the world in some way. I don't think any philosopher really changed the world. The people who changed the world were actually scientists.
Yeah, action always speak louder than words.
Exactly.
Okay, talking about bridge, um, the idea of a bridge, because I think the idea of a bridge in crypto started around 2017 or 16, and they want to solve the isolation problem between the blockchains. Uh, but in the real life, bridges is bridging the rivers. the two side of the rivers. But in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
industries, I never heard about the concept of a bridge. So if the bridge is idea that unique to blockchain world, or uh, other industries rely on similar concept as well, but we don't know.
Yeah, I think every industry has some notion of a bridge. Maybe they're not necessarily called a bridge. Personally, I think, for instance, Google is a bridge, in the sense that, like, Google kind of is the entry point to the internet. It bridges you to the internet in a sense. Like, you want to go somewhere, you go through Google, right? You're looking for some information, Google bridges that information kind of to you. Or you might think of something like Stripe, for instance. Stripe is like a bridge between you and your customers, right? Stripe allows you to collect payments and allows you to process payments and all these different stuff. So I think the concepts, ideologically exist, but maybe they're not necessarily called bridges. I think bridges are more defined in crypto because blockchains, like you said, are very isolated. And so there does need to be some infrastructure that's able to bring these isolated systems together to work in like as if they were a single thing, right?
Okay, Google is like a bridge. That's interesting. So why do you want to build a bridge from a ground up?
It's there's a very funny meme on the internet. We didn't do this because it was easy. We did it because we thought it was going to be easy. I think for me, I was looking for something to contribute to the crypto industry. Like I said, for me, I'm very, very like philosophically motivated to see this industry succeed, giving sort of the potentials in which it can change the world. And like I think it's already happening, right? That change is already happening with things like the stablecoin bill and like more and more companies coming on chain. Like we all saw this like way back then, 2017. We all saw that it was inevitable, right? And so I was just looking for gaps in the industry where there wasn't maybe enough infrastructure that I could potentially contribute to. I saw bridges as this sort of huge flaw in the industry. At the time, there was quite a lot of bridges that had been hacked during that 2017 to up until 2022 period, almost $3 billion just in that period alone. The Harmony Bridge, the Nomad Bridge, just all these bridges just failing at random times. And I saw that there's an opportunity here to actually build something that's going to be secure, it's going to be decentralized, and it's going to actually last long into the future and sort of become this infrastructure for the world. And that's kind of why we started building Hyperbridge. We also believe that like no one else has the technology to build a really decentralized bridge, right? There's only two ways to do this to build a decentralized bridge. Either you use ZK, which is still not yet proven, or you use something like Polkadot, which is able to give you all of this computational resources, which you can then use to perform bridging, right? So bridging is actually very, very compute intensive. If you think of it that way, it's kind of like graphics processing. Like graphics processing is a very, very computationally intensive thing that you actually need to have like a separate chip or hardware element to do this. So the same thing goes for bridging. And so having understood this, I saw that we were basically going to be the only ones who could launch any kind of decentralized bridge. And so that's why we started working on this.
Yes, you've mentioned that you saw a lot of uh, uh, how to say, the hackers happen in the crypto industry. A lot of asset was lost. So from this kind of accident, uh, how this, I think what you have learned from their accident.
I mean, I learned that like centralization is the root of all evil. And we already know this, right? That's why we built blockchains in the first place, to build decentralized infrastructure and to remove middlemen. But we still had this middleman at the most critical parts in the industry, which is the bridges between blockchains. So we saw that that's definitely not going to be sustainable, and we definitely want to replace that with something that's actually more decentralized. And it's been 2 years or more, I think almost 3 years now that we've been building Hyperbridge, and still there is no other like alternative, decentralized alternative for bridging in the industry. So I think we really made a good call there.
Yeah, even even some very popular. bridges like Wormhole, Layer Zero, or Axilla that didn't didn't meet your requirement.
So yeah, no, all of these bridges are still very much centralized in that they require middlemen to pass your message across to the destination chain. Hyperbridge doesn't really have any middlemen at all in that it's a fully autonomous blockchain. Like, blockchains are, usually autonomous, and you can only really control them maybe via token holder governance. So in that sense, it's fully decentralized. The rest of the bridges you've mentioned, they require people actually. They require people to notarize transactions to the destination chain and to authorize transactions to the destination chain, which in my opinion is just a disaster waiting to happen, right? Like I've said this so many times that like Hyperbridge is a short position on basically these bridges, right? I feel like I'm Michael Burry and it's 2008 and I'm shorting the entire financial market, like housing market, right? So that's kind of how I think about bridges.
Okay. Well, because for the hyperbridge, it's so it's an infrastructure, so there involves a lot of uh, technical words. And like you've said, a bridge is not just a message passer. It's a programmable crypto economy co-processor that verifies the computes off-chain states in a verifiable way. It's really hard for me to read even. So
Oh
could you
man.
explain more about, in a simple words, like how Hyperbridge works to make sure the security and the decentralization?
Yeah, for sure. So, I always like to talk about how, the ideal security model of a bridge should be. If two blockchains want to communicate with each other, just want to pass some data across to each other. Say you're on Polygon, for instance, you want to know if a message has been sent to you from Ethereum. You have two choices, really. Either you trust someone else who will be your oracle, who will be your sort of authority that tells you, oh, this is what is happening on Ethereum. And of course, if and when they get compromised, you start receiving fake messages telling you to give them all your money. And you wouldn't be able to tell, right? You would not be able to tell. It would basically seem like they're still sending you the right thing until, of course, it's too late. The second alternative is just that if you can look at Ethereum directly and you can verify what Ethereum is doing directly, then you can actually tell what's happening on Ethereum. So this verification process is particularly expensive. Ethereum, for instance, has over 1 million validators, right? And the only way to know what's actually happening on the network is to listen to the validators themselves. So imagine trying to listen to over 1 million validators to understand what's happening on Ethereum. This is particularly like computationally expensive. And so this is where this idea of a co-processor comes from. This idea that, okay, we need to do this compute, this verification process, this authentication process, but we can't do this on Polygon. It would be too expensive for Polygon to do this in the first place. And so if we can do this verification in some coprocessor and then have that coprocessor, just generate some proofs that it's done the correct computation, then Polygon can have a trustless view of Ethereum. And there's two ways to do this. Like I said, there's like the ZK route, and then there's the blockchain route. So I'm generalizing here, but both a ZK coprocessor and a blockchain are both verifiable computers, right? They're programmable. You can put any kind of programs in them, but the only difference is blockchains are decentralized, whereas a ZK system is centralized. Only one person can generate proofs, and they can potentially also censor you. They can decide what transactions they want to prove and what transactions they don't want to prove. And so we chose the blockchain route because it's of course cheaper. We don't have to have massive data farms to try to generate proofs, as is what we're now seeing in the industry. And we get to leverage the economic security of the Polkadot network. So the way Hyperbridge works is that it's going to do all of this verification that we just discussed on behalf of all the different blockchains. And at the end of the day, any of these blockchains can just receive a very small proof from Polkadot that the work that Hyperbridge has done is correct, and that here are all of the messages that have been verified and have been authenticated. And throughout that entire procedure, there is no person who controls it, right? Like the verification is done by programs that live on chain, so we don't control this. Our blocks are validated by the Polkadot network. We also don't control the Polkadot network, right? The Polkadot network is controlled by economic security and economic alignment. So if anybody were to say, "Oh, this block is valid," then they could get it's valid even though it's not valid. They could get slashed, right? Their entire stake could be taken away from them. And so this is how we've now built a blockchain itself as a bridge. And I'll be very honest with you, we also took some inspiration from the Polkadot relay chain itself. So the Polkadot relay chain itself is also a co-processor, right? It's co-processing parachains and all this other stuff, and it's using that to bridge them together. So we just extend the Polkadot network onto a parachain and do the same thing for other blockchains.
Oh, cool. I can see that there's so much uh, work behind this to make sure the decentralization of this bridge. I'm curious to know that why not other bridges try to do this? It is because it's only can happen under the Polkadot infrastructure, or it's too costly. It's so cost to to achieve the decentralization.
So it's two things. It's like you said, they definitely don't have the technology to do this. Like I said, I've reduced the bridging problem to either you do ZK or you do a blockchain-based type of bridge. If you do ZK, then you need to invent, very efficient ZK, and the industry for ZK is just not there, honestly, right? We've seen ZK EVMs shutting down, so that tells us a lot. And in terms of a blockchain design, there's just no blockchain that's as scalable as Polkadot, right? Remember, Polkadot can have the ability to run parallel blockchains up to, and right now it's running around 50, and there's proposals to increase this to 150. So when we look at, okay, if anyone wants to build a blockchain that can be a bridge, they need to also do this parallel thing where they can process multiple things at once. And unfortunately, it's the case that Polkadot is the only project that actually builds this sharded scalable system, right? There's literally no other blockchain that is sharded and scalable.
Oh, that's okay. Now I get it. Um, the okay, so Polkadot have the advanced infrastructure, so they can make that makes the decentralization happening on Hyperbridge, and now Hyperbridge already integrated the Ethereum, BNB, and so on. But I think the other issue is that how to make sure the other ecosystem that uh, adopt Hyperbridge. Do you have some plans or strategy to do that?
Yeah, no, I think basically what drives adoption is utility and usage. So we are working on a few applications that would drive that utility and usage to Hyperbridge. We will be launching an intent or cross chain token bridge, or rather, I think it's more accurate to call it cross chain token swaps on Hyperbridge, which will allow you to swap any kind of ERC20 assets between all the different networks that we support. So we would be able to support like stablecoins, wrapped ETH, BTC, whatever the tokens may be. And this will, of course, this would be more tokens than we currently natively support. So right now, we only natively support tokens that have natively integrated Hyperbridge, like the DOT token, the Bifrost token, some other networks like Siri and the like. And yeah, I think this will open our protocol up to, of course, a wider section of users. And as more people start to use it and start to become more comfortable with it, then other ecosystems can also become more comfortable with Hyperbridge because it would have proven its utility. It would have proven that it's actually infrastructure for cross-chain application.
Okay, cool. And the application will drive the use of Hyperbridge. And for normal users, uh, uh, is it really necessary for normal users to use bridge, or uh, actually the bridge was covered behind the is just deployed behind the scene, so and the bridges should be invisible, and just like TCP IP for Web3, and normal people don't have to have any tangible access to it. What's your take on this?
I definitely believe that bridges should become, invisible infrastructure. My ultimate goal is that you wouldn't actually have to go to a separate bridge. You would just go to the application you wanted to use, and it would already integrate some native bridging functionality that would allow you to bring your assets like wherever they are into the application, right? This is the so-called chain abstraction thesis. And yeah, I think this also is really good for Hyperbridge because this means that it's not users who are choosing the bridges; it's actually technical people, right? The technical teams who get to choose the bridge, and they will make these choices based off of things like security, things like decentralization, and things like permissionlessness, right?
Okay, and give an idea of a tangible idea of bridges. Can you uh, share with us what's the most use cases that bridge was adopted nowadays?
Definitely for moving stablecoins around. I think stablecoins have been the most bridged asset, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you don't want to bridge an asset that's going to be losing value as you're right as you're bridging it. You want your assets to keep their value, and stablecoins are also a way to sort of preserve wealth to some extent, right? So you swap all of the volatile assets you have for a stablecoin, and then you just move your wealth from one chain, basically to the next, and go do some other things there as well. So we're very focused on stablecoin integrations, and I think definitely there'll be more stablecoin and real world asset integrations natively on Hyperbridge in the coming months.
Oh, cool. Uh, the talking about the stable coins, we are seeing a wave of regulatory support for stable coins. Uh, but uh, you, as you mentioned, the demand for the stablecoin bridge is high, and and uh, the the USDT, the tether, the company, the tether, gonna launch their own tier one, their own blockchain for holding the stable coins. So do you still believe that there's gonna a highly demand for cross chain transitioning for the for the stable coins?
I mean, the way I see the industry playing out, and I've always said this, is that there's not going to be one blockchain that takes over the entire world, right? Like, that's not how decentralization works. More likely, we're going to see different blockchains win at different verticals and in different regions and economies and geographies, right? Whether as a result of regulatory clarity, or whether as a result of just better understanding of that market and being able to penetrate it much better, right? So good examples of this is, right, like in Africa, for instance, a lot of people use the BNB chain, a lot of people use Tron, not so much Arbitrum and Ethereum. But if you're in America, in North America, lots of people use Base, lots of people use like the popular blockchains that come out of North America. Of course, in Asia, it's a completely different story as well, right? And the same thing in Europe and in the Middle East. So different blockchains are winning in different places just because of that's kind of how they focus their strategy. And so there's still going to be a need for infrastructure that allows all these different like economies and all these different like geographies to exchange value between themselves. So as long as there are blockchains, there's always definitely going to be bridges. No one blockchain is going to scale to the entire world.
Mm, agree with you. Uh, yeah. So the stablecoin, the most demand is from the centralized exchanges, or from, because I think the people are when they are transitioning the stable coins, mostly the they are transitioning from the Binance or OKX to other chains. So the demanding for transitioning on chain, or how is the status?
I think unfortunately, it's the case that we will see more and more users use decentralized applications than they use centralized applications. And we can see this in the volume of, centralized exchange trading volume versus decentralized exchange trading volume, right? That decentralized trading volume has consistently gone up, and I think it's now at around 36 or 37% of the market. Sure, there's great advantages to centralized exchanges, but as there becomes more and more regulatory clampdown, KYC reporting, tax reporting, and all these different things, I think more and more people are going to opt for decentralized bridges as a way to bypass all of these different things, right? So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I don't think centralized exchanges are going to play that role as a bridge forever. I think more and more people will choose to route their money through on-chain protocols where they don't have to KYC and they don't have to, basically every time they move their money, write a report as to what they're doing with their money, right? Like that's a lot of friction. And so the user experience of decentralized exchanges are actually much better than the user experience of centralized exchanges.
Oh, good, good to hear. And I think in this cycle, it is really obvious that normal users are, you know, are more active on chain.
Yes, yes, that's indeed the case. I think with the spectacular failures of a lot of exchanges, I go back to the days of BitMEX, I go back to the days of Quadriga, more recently FTX. People are realizing that exchanges are also kind of a bank, and this is actually the reason we built blockchains is that we didn't want to trust banks. So I think decentralized applications are only going to keep gaining more adoption as more and more people become blockchain literate is the word I would use.
Okay, cool. And beside the stable coins, there's another burning words in crypto, which is the tokenized stocks. And uh, what role do bridges play in making that possible?
I think definitely, I talked about this as well. Real world assets in general are definitely also going to be something that is amplified by bridges. I had recently had a call with the head of digital assets at UBS, which is a bank from out of Switzerland. They're now starting to issue on-chain financial instruments, for tokenizing ETFs and bonds and all sorts of index funds. Right now they only issue on Ethereum, but like they want to access more users, right? And so to do that, they have to integrate bridges that will then take these assets to wherever they need to be accessed from, right? So, once again, all of these different real world assets, whether stablecoins, whether tokenized equities and stocks, they're all going to require bridges to be successful.
Oh, I see that nowadays, at least recently, the the issued tokenized stocks are listed on Bybit, Bigate, these centralized exchanges a lot. So
I mean, but we're also seeing on-chain tokenization as well, right? Like with
wow,
Robinhood and with Solana as well with X tokens. So I'm of the opinion that like yeah, you can issue it on a centralized exchange, but the reach, the availability of these products are limited fundamentally by the centralized exchange, and they really become unlimited when they're fully on-chain, right?
yeah, okay. I think we've we've have tons of knowledge from our previous conversation, and
Yeah.
we need time to think in. I think now I prepare some very some bonus questions, very uh, relaxed ones.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
is there anything you actually miss about your life before crypto? Something simpler, quieter, less online?
Nah, I don't. I unfortunately don't miss anything. My life was pretty boring before crypto. I didn't really. I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't really have any purpose or direction. I felt like working at a big tech corporation and continuing to expand the dominance of big tech corporations was pretty sad. And crypto being this thing that can really decentralize and create new opportunities for the everyday person honestly is the biggest revolution of our modern times. It's even, in my opinion, a much bigger impact than AI. So I really enjoy being in crypto, and I'm definitely going to be in crypto, for the foreseeable future.
Oh, okay. And you love working.
Unfortunately.
Do you see yourself more as an engineer or more as a philosopher?
I would say I'm 51% engineer, 49% philosopher. Like I said, I think it's important to combine both. I think engineering without any kind of like philosophy is pretty useless. You know, you just end up building centralized things because there's no philosophy behind them. And if you're a philosopher, then you don't even build anything at all, right? You're just on Twitter, just yapping all day, you know, not really making any difference to the world. So I'm a healthy combination of both, is how I would say.
Yeah, good to hear. Have you ever had one of those late night moments and staring at the protocol code and suddenly realizing how insane humans actually are?
Oh man, tons of times, tons of times. I think I often review and read a lot of other like bridge protocols code, and this is like I said, this is why we're shorting the entire market and we're building our own thing. I mean, like I said, without any strong basis in philosophy, you end up building something that is either like an evil thing, honestly, or is a careless thing. You know, it's not really, you didn't probably intend to harm someone, but like because you didn't have the philosophy, the necessary philosophy, it becomes something that's actually a potential hazard, right? So, yeah, I've had tons of those moments, and that's actually what motivates me to continue working on Hyperbridge and working on Polkadot and trying to make this industry much better. I think protocols are supposed to be these things that decentralize and disintermediate middlemen, and any protocol that requires middlemen to function is not going to last long.
Cool. If you were not in crypto today, what would you be doing instead?
That's a very interesting question, and I've not really had time to think about it. But I think I find robotics and automation very exciting, and scaling the manufacturing capacity of the world and making things ultimately cheap for everyone. I think that's going to be huge. So I would probably be doing robotics instead. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, I think there's a tons of knowledge for our audience to think in, and we will have a Chinese text version recap published on our WeChat later soon. And I think we can call it an end for this interview, and we will follow closely to you and Hyperbridge, and hope you can come to our pop broadcast next time.
For sure, for sure. It's always great to hang out and chat, Kristen. Yeah,
Okay,
thanks for having me once again.
okay, thank you. Until next time.
Yeah, see you next time. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.